What a fantastic session from Arnaud and Stacia. I've got to be honest, I'm one of these that was thinking, okay, is skills-based hiring, skills-based organization, is the juice worth squeezing? But I think having listened to Stacia and Arnaud, it became clear in my own mind that actually here's a path forward to how to do it. Particularly important with regards to how skills-based hiring can really unlock the internal mobility piece. We're going to go straight into the next session. And the reason we want to do that is because I don't want to take any more time away from this next speaker. He's one of the leading thinker doers, I would call them, in our industry today. It is Tim Ringo. He's got a wonderful new book coming out, and it's going to be talking to us about that going through. Tim, take it away. I'll be joining you back for Q&A after your presentation, sir.
Hung, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Ringo. I'm doing the session today called Demystifying Digital Transformation in the Workplace. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here at EmpowerHR for Europe. I was very honored when Better Works reached out to me to join this very esteemed panel of speakers that you're going to be seeing today. So this is a highlight of my week. So I'm really happy to be here. And thanks again to Better Works. But let's talk a little bit about my background, so it kind of brings some of the content into context today. I guess my biggest and best qualification for speaking today is that I'm old. 34-year career as a senior executive, leading HR management consulting and HR software engagements worldwide. I retired in 2020 from SuccessFactors and published my book called Solving the Productivity Puzzle, which came out during the pandemic, which wasn't the original plan, but ended up being very prescient in that people were very focused on productivity during the pandemic. So the book did very well, and in fact won Business Book of the Year award in HR and Management in 2021. Very surprised, very happy about that. And I'll be pulling a lot of content from that today. But my career, if we look at it a little bit more detail, I was at Accenture for 16 years. It's where I started coming out of the Ohio State University. I'm originally from Ohio. I've been living in London for 27 years now, nearly half my life here in the UK. I was recruited to IBM in 2006 by Ginny Rometty, who's today the chairman of IBM. She brought me over to lead IBM's global human capital consulting practice. So I set up the world's first SuccessFactors and Workday systems integration practice way back in 2006, 2007. And then I ended my career, so to speak, at SAP SuccessFactors the last 6 years working on the software side. So I've got a unique kind of combination of consulting and having worked in software. My next book that's coming out is not surprising that most people are talking about these things, is called Revelation, Harnessing AI in the Workplace. But I take a slightly different view. I'm a little bit concerned about that essentially AI is being oversold at the moment, and that really what we need to focus on is how we teach people how to harness AI so that we can make them better at their jobs. And I focus on that, and I'm going to bring some of that content in today. But I'm not going to talk a lot about AI. I'm going to talk much broader picture, which is the overall, doing digital transformation in the workplace, of which AI is part of that. As you can see at the bottom of the screen here, my website, timringo.com. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn every day, posting hopefully interesting things for you to see. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can grab this QR code and it will guide you as well. So that's a little bit about me, but let's get into the content. What are we going to talk about today? I mean, what does it mean of demystifying digital transformation? Well, the whole idea is basically that, these things are only difficult or seem complicated because I believe we kind of make them that way. And I'm going to bring you some simple ideas, some simple concepts and models on what people are doing that makes implementing digital transformation successful. And I'm going to very much focus on people because that's where the action is. But let's talk about what we'll see today. So I'm going to ask you a question. Are you ready? I think we're at a once-in-a-generation technological inflection point in the workplace. It's unlike anything we've really seen. I think the last big technological inflection point that we had was at sort of 1999, 2000, when the internet was starting to be commercialized and people were starting to use it in work. We're at that kind of inflection point. So it's been well over 24 years, 25 years since we've been at this kind of situation. The next one is, for me, everything starts with motivation. This is why I like tools like Better Works, because they're all about what we call performance management. But as we know, performance management is about tapping into people's motivations. And we need to recognize that, how people are motivated in the 21st century is very different from how people were motivated 100 years ago, back in the 1920s. And, how we're motivated probably isn't what you think, and we'll talk about that. Solving the productivity puzzle. Well, it's not easy, but, in fact, one of the biggest problems is that technology is part of the problem. Technology is actually interfering with our ability to be more productive at work in the last 10, 15 years, and I'll talk about that as well. But I think there's a fantastic new philosophy that's emerging about technology in the workplace, where technology no longer is about compliance and process. It's about people-centric solutions that are about making you better at work, not making you compliant, right? So it's a kind of flipping of the model. And this is why I'm very optimistic about technologies in the workplace going forward and helping us be more productive. I'm going to actually outline a framework for you, which is, how do you create an engaged workforce? How do you get people motivated to think and do differently and innovate? Well, you need to underpin this kind of framework with technology, but the framework is a mindset and a set of processes that you then use technology later to ultimately to create bigger and better outcomes. Number 6, I'm going to talk about common mistakes that I've seen organizations make for years when acquiring and implementing workplace technologies. One of the reasons my hair is gray is because I've been in so many programs where, unfortunately, technology was leading the way, when in reality, when we're putting technology into the workplace, it needs to be about people first, technology second. And you can imagine, sometimes when I say that, people in the software industry get a little bit alarmed, but the fact is that's the right way around, and software vendors increasingly are acknowledging that. And the last one, the future is bright. I'm going to put some ideas out there for what you should watch for going forward, but let's dive in. These are the sorts of things we're going to cover. So for me, everything starts here, really. My whole career and the passion that I've developed over the past 34 or 35 years has really been all about, how do we match people's desire to their motivations and put them in the right place at the right time to succeed in an organization. And so when I was doing research for solving the productivity puzzle, I ran across this quote from Rumi, who was a 12th century poet, who said, "Everyone has been made for some particular work, and the desire for that work has been put in every heart." And I just love that, because it just kind of, no matter where I am in the world, whether I'm in Asia, Middle East, South America, Africa, Europe, North America, it doesn't matter what culture or region, this is very human. This idea is independent of culture or region. It's very kind of at the heart of humans. But the way I like to describe it is, I think the way to make this work, what Rumi's describing here, it's a two-way street, right, in the workplace. First of all, I think we as the employees, we as people, we need to understand what it is our passion, or we need to find that passion and kind of figure out what we want to do when we grow up, right? And that can take time. Some people are lucky, they know what they want to do from early age. Other people, like me, it took me into almost my 30s. But you need to find that passion and then follow it. And then the other side of the coin is that organizations need to recognize that passion and try to put you in positions where they're capturing and allowing you to drive that passion, right? So the organization has a role in putting you at the right place, the right time to succeed, right? To let you flourish. So this is a kind of two-way street. You need to let the organization know what your passion is. The organization should then put that passion to work. And that's kind of how I see what Rumi's talking about here almost 1,000 years ago, what he's talking about here and how that would work in the workplace. It's kind of my motto, really. And I think solutions like BetterWorks are, really a big part of that, right? Because that's how we get to uncover and document and create a process around people's motivations. So this is a question I've been asking for a few years now, since about 2020, when this word first came into being. It's a new word, and it's called the Yoda bite. And I typically ask at conferences when I've got 900 or 1,000 people has anybody ever heard of a Yoda bite? And I have yet to find anybody raise their hand in any conference I've been doing, either virtual or in person for the past few years, anyone who said, I know what a Yoda bite is. So I'm going to explain it to you. And I will tell you one thing it's not. It's not a Star Wars character. It's not a poisonous bite from an insect. What it is it's an impossibly large number, right? It's a 1 followed by 27 zeros, or in sort of normal speak, it's a septillion, right? A septillion is 1 trillion trillion. It's a number that the human brain really would struggle, if you tried to understand it, would struggle to get your head around it, literally. And so when we look at the kind of data side of that, the bytes, right, which are the elemental measurement of technology processing and memory capture, we have prefixes, right? So we're familiar with kilo and mega and gigabytes from our iPhones and things like that. Well, guess what? In the world today, we are sitting in the Yoda byte era, right? And we only entered that in about 2019. We only added those 3 zeros at the end in 2019. And what that number is, that's the amount of data, the amount of bytes of data flying around the internet every day. So 1 trillion bytes of data flying around the internet every day. And we call it a Yoda byte. Now, guess what? We're about to add 3 more zeros to this in about 2027. And there's currently a contest to figure that out. At the moment, it looks like the word Bronto byte is winning at the moment. It almost sounds like dinosaurs, but where these funny names come from, I don't know. But the next era very likely would be called the Bronto byte in about 26, 27. Now, why is this number important? Well, we could not have things like artificial intelligence. We could not have the Internet of Things. We could not have smart technologies today if we didn't have this ability to process this amount of data around the world every day. That's why you're seeing more powerful technology come along. Now, the good news is that it can drive things like AI, which hopefully will make us better in work. But the bad news is a lot of these technologies are so powerful that they interfere with work, right? And interfere with our productivity. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But overall, being in the Yoda byte era and then the Bronto byte era is a very, very good thing. This is when we're going to see the power go up again exponentially in what we're going to be able to do with technology. And so we need to get ready for this, right? That's part of the question I was asking. Are you ready? Well, the Yoda byte is the reason why you need to be ready. So what does that mean? So let's just take a look at kind of the past and let's look at today. And let's look at it in terms of the workplace. So back in 1990 to 1992, when I first started my career, that's really when the PC first appeared on people's desks. And this is what it looked like. It was often a Mac or something similar to that, but it had a screen, a processor, a keyboard, and a mouse. Now you fast forward 30 years later to 2022, 2024, and guess what? It looks the same. We have a screen, we've got a keyboard, a processor, and a mouse. And really nothing's changed other than they've become wireless, really. And so this is quite remarkable because given all the technology that we've been putting in place for all these years, why haven't we seen how we interact with technology, the tools that we use, why hasn't that changed? A lot of senior executives, a lot of CEOs are starting to ask that question. Why, when we're at home, we have all this fantastic technology, right? We've got our Google Homes, our Amazon Alexa, which is, I'm going to wake mine up here in a moment. She sits here by my desk. We have lots of tools that we use at home that make us more productive at home. So for instance, at my house, we have a new Samsung refrigerator that has a processor and a connection to the Wi-Fi, and it's got cameras inside. And it's evaluating inside the refrigerator expiry dates of food. It's letting us know when certain things are out, and it can order those things for us, like eggs and milk and those sorts of things. I mean, this is the kind of things we have at home. And so there's a real question mark as to why we're not bringing those types of devices into work and using the power of that. And one of the things I like to put forward is I think that the future of work is nearly here, where I think we're going to see less keyboard, we're going to see less screen and mouse, and we're going to start to be interacting with our technology. We're going to start talking to our HR systems. We're going to schedule a performance management review by talking to our Amazon Alexa. We're going to use it to assign work. We're going to use it to do other things, right? And it's intelligent, right? It's AI voice capable device, and it's going to be almost like your personal assistant. We're going to see more and more of this coming. And so the workplace is about to change. So we need to think really careful about how we're going to use technology like this, right? This is technology that is going to make us better, but we have to get the workplace ready for that in order that we capture the productivity uplifts from that. And that's really what I mean by demystifying the digital workplace. It means we need to move into using new devices, new smart technologies that are going to ultimately augment human and make us better and higher quality work. And that's where things are headed. But let's set that aside for the moment and let's look at some broader sort of changes that are going on. What is driving the need to demystify the digital workplace? Well, it's change, right? And a lot of the change happened during the pandemic. We saw HR take center stage because it was a people crisis, right? The 2008 financial crisis was CFO's problem, right? This time it was CHRO's problem, and they stepped up and it kept people safe and productive and engaged. And that's really put HR in a different space than they were in 2019. And that's a really powerful thing. It's the first, crisis in my 34, 35 years that I've seen actually made things better for HR, right? It put a spotlight on us. And I think that's a good thing, right? And we'll talk about why that is. And part of that is, well, HR has been helping us figure out, well, hang on, we were using kind of home working, starting to use flexible working. HR is trying to figure out, well, how do we continue to do this? Because people came back after the pandemic and said, hey, I still want to work at home a bit because I'm more productive if I do that a couple days a week. Hey, I want to work 4 days a week because I want to be able to focus 1 day a week on stuff I need to do at home, right? And people are looking to move to 4-day weeks and even 3-day weeks, this kind of flexible working, which is a bit back to the future because in the 1920s, Ford Motor Company and some of the big manufacturers of cars back then, they were one of the first organizations, if not the first, to implement 3-day and 4-day weeks. And they did that to rest employees so they could be more productive, right? So I think it's really interesting that in some ways we're going back to the future in this respect. The next one is, well, these things have then started to change workplace culture. We've had to adapt to working and doing online meetings, right? We kind of tried to drop the three-dimensional world into Zoom or to Teams, and that just didn't work. We had to learn new skills, new culture. We also found that managers, a lot of them are a lot more comfortable now with their teams not always being there, right? So the death of presenteeism. Presenteeism is this idea that I'm in the office during the hours the boss is in the office. It doesn't matter if I have something to do or not. I want him to see or her to see that I'm there, right? That's not good working. That's not smart working, right? That in fact, in many ways, it's bad for your health. And we don't have time to go into that. But the good news is we're starting to see the death of presenteeism finally after the pandemic. And the other thing, again, before the pandemic, there was a lot of money being spent on workforce well-being. Well, there's even more being spent now, and it's being spent on different things. It's not just your physical well-being, but it's also your mental health well-being. It's about your physical, your monetary well-being. Some companies are starting to pay higher salaries than they were before because of the rise in cost of living so that people are stressed about money. So workforce well-being is a very broad subject, and it's getting invested in different ways and in much greater ways than in the past. The next one, a real focus on workplace diversity. And this is something, again, that was already growing before the pandemic. But, it's things like gender, race, sexual orientation, disabilities. These things actually, when we're doing Zoom meetings and we're doing Teams meetings, that's actually reduced the amount of difference that we encounter at work. It's been kind of a leveler in a way. But I think another thing that's been really interesting is people are starting to realize that people with neurodiversity conditions like ADHD or autism or dyspraxia or other things like this, they have other talents that those that don't have those conditions don't have. And a lot of organizations are actively looking, for instance, to recruit in people who are on the autistic spectrum because they have certain skills. They're very problem solvers. They tend to see things differently than those of us who don't have those conditions, and thus drive a lot of innovation and those sorts of things. So workplace diversity is broadening as well in terms of things it covers. And I think that's very exciting. As I said earlier, human-centric technology, there's a big focus now by senior executives saying, I want a better employee experience, right? And that's a big part of tools like BetterWorks. Those are designed not for compliance around performance management. They are designed to make the manager and the employee better at the idea of performance management and motivating employees. And that's a better employee experience. Another thing, one of the things that I really hate to hear about is this thing called big data. It's annoyed me for many years. I wrote a book back in 2010 on workforce analytics. And one of the main parts of the book was saying, if you have big data, you have nothing. What you want is smart data, right? Less data that's targeted, that creates insights, right? Insights into work, insights into the organization you can act on. Big data, you can't see the woods for the trees, right? And then lastly, solving the productivity puzzle. This has been something that organizations have been focused on for quite a few years now, which is why I wrote the book. And let's talk a little bit about that and how that fits into demystifying the digital workplace. So even before COVID-19, we were already sleepwalking into a productivity crisis. In 2011, towards the end of the financial crisis, when lots of cost cutting was done, there was this whole thing about let's do more with less. Well, that was bad. That might have been good for cost, but it was really bad for people's productivity. There was a huge reduction in investment of training and aligning people to technology, all those sorts of things. And guess what? We've seen the longest period of stagnant or declining people productivity in recorded history. Typically, these kind of blips in productivity go up and down every 18 months, 2 years or so. This has been a 10-year situation. And in fact, it was so bad in in 2020 that the OECD put out a paper that said, look, we're going to start seeing the average annual rate of GDP growth go down for the next 50 years. It's been going up for the past 50 or 100 years. Now we're going to see a period where it's going down. And that's bad because when GDP goes down, lifestyle and living standards go down. So we've had ever increasing living standards since the early 1900s. And they're saying basically from here on out, from 2020 to 2060, 40-year period, we've kind of peaked. We're going to be going down in terms of living standards because GDP growth is going to go down. And they had 3 reasons for this that I agree with, but I'll tell you also what I disagreed with it. But basically they said there's 3 things. 1, we're not investing enough in people to align them to technology to make them better. Totally agree with that. 2nd, we are not reassessing and redesigning processes to take advantage of digital technology. We're still living in the kind of 20th century process redesign kind of world. And 3rd, we're not flattening organizations in terms of their organization structure to take advantage of digital technology. So I agree with all 3 of those things. The thing I disagree with is that that's going to be a problem for the next 40 years. I actually see, and I get to travel around and see what organizations are doing. I see, no matter where I go in the world, people are working on these 3 things. They are trying to solve these problems, but it's not consistent. There's not enough consistent success in solving those problems. So I disagree that they're not going to get fixed. I think we just have to get better at it. And that's going to be part of the role of technology and how I'm going to explain that today in my frameworks of how I think we might do this. But as I said, one thing for certain is that for the past 10 years, technology has raced ahead of us so fast that it's actually impeded our ability to be productive. And on top of that, we haven't invested in people and changed organizations. So there shouldn't be any surprise that we've struggled with productivity because, going from 1785, which this curve shows, we've seen nothing but technology racing ahead for 250 years. And there's something that's called the productivity paradox that was discovered in the 1960s, which essentially says whenever there's a new technology inflection point, like when the cotton gin came along or the steam engine, people had to race to catch up with those things, but they did so usually within about 18 months, 2 years, and they found ways to make that technology work for them and make them more productive. But as I said before, we've been in a situation for the past 10 years, we have not been able to catch up because the technologies we're putting in place aren't being done to make people better. And that's a big part of it. And so we're being overloaded with systems that don't really do anything for us in terms of making us better at work. And so we've had a very elongated period of the productivity paradox. But the good news is, and I believe the pandemic accidentally has solved a lot of this. It's broken a lot of bad habits that we were having at work. And we don't have time to go into them today. I've alluded to a few of them, but we've broken some bad habits and we've created things like flexible working and home working. And as I predicted in solving the productivity puzzle, which came out just before the pandemic, I figured we were going to see a J curve in terms of an upward trend in people productivity. And guess what? It's starting to happen. We are finally, after 10 years, seeing people productivity all around the world is starting to go on an upward trend. And so I call that the optimist view versus the pessimist view of the OECD. So the OECD and economists like that, I put them in the pessimist camp. Whether they like that or not, it's another thing. I sit in the optimist camp because I see things changing, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But one of the things that we can't do to fix the problem, right? And there's been a lot of studies on this in the past 5, 6, 7 years that shows just working harder actually makes the problem worse. It's throwing more people and more hours of productivity, you actually reduce productivity. There's a diminishing returns, which is an economic phrase, which says you just hit a wall, and because you can't go any higher, you can only go down. And that's essentially what happens. And so what economists are starting to notice is it looks like around 34 hours a week is the kind of ideal amount of time humans should be spending at work and doing work, which suggests a 4-day week, which guess what? 100 years ago, that's what manufacturers were doing back then. It was World War II that kind of broke that because we had to ramp up massively, production and things like that. And we have to do that in our jobs today. But I think getting in a habit of working like that, of working 60, 70 hours a week and doing that for years on end, which is what we've been doing since 2011, it's made the problem worse. You get diminishing returns from that. And the idea is to get that kind of, that medium bit. And people that are working closer to 34 hours a week report a couple of things that are really interesting psychologically. One, they're more focused at work because they have less time to do things. They're better at prioritizing their work. And third, having that extra day, that kind of 3-day weekend, they come back more energized. And when I look back at my career, I'm not a sociologist or a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I can totally buy into that. I can see that would work, where we're doing 4-day weeks, kind of creates that focus, but at the same time gives people a bit of rest. And so I'm not surprised with this data that's coming out. So just working harder doesn't fix it. So what does fix it? Well, one of the things that's really important, and I would recommend you read this book if you haven't already, read it before any of my books. But this is by an American economist called Daniel Pink. He wrote this book 10 years ago called Drive, I think actually 11 years ago now, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And I won't have time to go into great detail here, but there's a couple of things that he says that's really, really important, I think, which is that today in the 21st century, where 80% of people, 70, 80% of people now work in office type situations, we can't motivate people like we did in 1924 or in the 20th century when 70, 80% of people worked in factories or farms. Back then, if you paid people a cash bonus, they'd work faster and harder. Today, we do knowledge work, and his studies and lots of data shows that getting people too focused on money, like bonuses and things, actually reduces their productivity. What you want to do is, sure, money is a motivator, but tap into 3 other things that are super important. 1, autonomy. Give people the space to do the work, right? Don't micromanage them, and allow them to get on with it and take risks, right? People are highly motivated in a situation where they feel like they've got space to do it, space to take decisions, space to take risks, right? And that is encouraged, and that creates huge amounts of motivation. So workplaces like Accenture and Apple and others who have loads of autonomy in their workforces, well, guess what? Those are great places to work. The second thing is create opportunities for people to master new skills, right? When you were back picking fruit or putting together a motor car, you didn't really need any new skills, but today things change so quickly. You have to be constantly developing new skills. Like, how do I use AI, right? That's a whole skill, because AI is only as good as the questions you ask it, and it is only as good as your ability to interpret that data that the AI is telling you. So you're going to need to master a new skill. And guess what? People love doing that. They love to learn. And that is highly motivating when the organization gives you plenty of opportunities to master those skills. And guess what? Then to build your career. And then lastly, the really important part of motivation, purpose, right? We've heard a lot about purpose-led organizations. And, I would look at SpaceX. I'll never hold up Elon Musk as a great boss, but what he's very good at is creating a purpose and a vision, right? So if you look at SpaceX, the reason he gets the best space engineers, aeronautical engineers in the world and pays them 20% less, the reason why he can do that is because of his purpose. His purpose, that organization's whole purpose, is to get to Mars, right? And that excites a lot of people. Like me, I love that idea. That's such a great big idea, right? And people will gravitate towards that, right? And so he gets the best talent, the most motivated talent, and he pays them less, right? They will come work for him for less. So Daniel Pink said, look, when you're thinking about motivation, these are the 3 core things in the 21st century. Get people, not focusing on their cash bonus and the salary. Add this to the picture to get kind of a balanced view in terms of motivation. It makes a lot of sense when most of us are doing knowledge work, right? So here's the framework. This is what I've been promising you. So when people ask me, Tim, how do these organizations that are super productive, like, Accenture and Apple and Google and others, why are they so productive and innovative? Well, the thing that I've seen that all of those companies do really, really well, they have an equation for working smarter. And I call it people engagement, innovation, and performance, or PEIP. But it's really simple. It's right people, right skills, right place, right time, and very importantly, and this is where performance management solutions like BetterWorks come in, right motivation, right? You have to stretch people, have to give them goals to reach for, but then get them in the right place at the right time with the right skills, right? And that is very, very powerful. Now, first of all, this is not a technology. This is a mindset that starts with the CEO and the top executive team that gets converted into a business operating model and a set of processes, right? This is how we do business. We are going to try to get you in the right place at the right time with the right motivation as much as we can. You can't do it 100%, but we'll do it 70% of the time. And who doesn't want to work there, right? And you create an organization where there's people engagement, innovation, high performance, and productivity. And so I've been very lucky to be inside a lot of these organizations over the years. This is what I've seen they do very, very well. They create a situation where people flourish and grow, right? And guess what? When you take this, and I was talking about, AI as part of this model, back in 2017 when I first put it together, I always sort of foresaw that, AI, if you plug that into this, you make it super powerful, you turbocharge people's performance. And I think, unlike the OECD, I think we're on the verge of historic people productivity like we've never seen before, because we're going to finally get the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. And we're going to use smart technologies to make that happen. And we're going to use smart technologies to allow people to augment themselves and make them smarter and make them better at their work. And that's why I think it's such an exciting time at the moment. And I retired in 2020. Well, that's why I'm still doing things like this today, because I just think it's such an exciting time. And that's why I love writing books and speaking about this. But this is, I know it's simple. This is very difficult to implement, but this is a simple model when you think about it, right? And how it might work. Now, just one thing on AI that, I absolutely have thought this for years now, that if we can get AI in a position where people can use it to augment themselves, we will see greater people productivity. It just makes sense, right? Well, we're here now, right? It's now here. Generative AI, at least, is here. And people like Goldman Sachs are saying, hey, we can add 1.5% to GDP over the next, 10-year period. We can lift, global GDP to nearly $7 trillion. And in fact, they're saying, the total uplift could be as high as 2.9%, right? And I actually think that's low. I think this is still quite conservative based on kind of, my time with workforces, and when you give them the right tools, how powerful that is. So I totally buy into this, that this time has arrived, but we have to figure out how to use it. That's what's going to be really important. And so how do we use it? Well, this is where HR comes in, right? And this is a solution that I call the integrated employee experience. And if you want to put people in that position where they flourish, if you want to create PEIP, that model I showed you, well, this is what it looks like in HR. You basically have your processes for attracting and retaining people, integrated then in your ability to motivate and develop those people as you bring them in, then connect and enable them using social technology so they can collaborate and share, and then deploy and manage them to the right place at the right time. And so, as I was saying earlier, this is a mindset and a set of processes. Well, these are the processes, right? This is what you want to put in place, this integrated approach. Organizations that get this wrong have, recruitment over here, and then they've got performance management over here, and they've got kind of deployment sits in the operations. And you want to bring this all together underneath HR and let them run this and get the workplace in the right place, which allows the CEO to take their enterprise strategy, throw it into the organization, and guess what? You can go and get the right people. You can give them, goals based on their motivations. You can develop them with training. You can connect, enable them, and then deploy them to the right place at the right time. And guess what you get? Enterprise performance, right? So this is the kind of circular model of what I was talking about in terms of PEIP. And what's inside of this? Well, it's recruitment and onboarding, performance and goals and rewards, learning and collaboration, workforce management, succession, These are the kind of integrated processes that you then want to underpin with smart HR technologies. And this will help you match people's desire to the work and make it part of the DNA of the organization. It can't be taken away. This is how we do work, right? And this is what creates much greater people performance and productivity. And guess what? A much more engaging sort of work. And so what is that? Well, I like to say, let's improve every moment of the employee lifecycle. But what am I talking about? Candidate experience, training and development, employee engagement, rewards and benefits. Everywhere along this life cycle, let's make it absolutely a great experience for that employee. Treat them like a customer. And HR's role should be to do that, to put these things into these processes, these mindset, these technologies that create everything from the time you come in as your candidate experience to your exit is a great experience. Or in other words, create moments that matter all the way along the process. So we're getting to the end here, and a lot of people usually ask me, say, okay, Tim, I get all of this. This makes a lot of sense, but where do we start and where are we going? Well, I put together this thing called the Digital Workplace Continuum, which is basically kind of saying, right, what are the steps to do to demystify digital transformation? Well, the first thing is to be an intender, at least. Say, look, we're going to go down this path, and we're going to start looking at technology. We're going to start looking at operational changes to the organization. That's the first step. It's a digital intender. The next step is to say, well, guess what? We're going to now plan a program that we're going to implement in the organization. We're going to look at culture, processes, technologies, and we're going to start to develop plans to go from being an intender to a doer, right? Which gets to the next thing. You put in place a digital program. And most companies have this today, right? Some sort of digital transformation program. And almost everybody is here at this point, right? We've got a program. We're trying to execute on creating the digital workforce. We've got a roadmap, we've got a business case, all these sorts of things. So we're setting off on our trip down through this journey. And as you do this is what I always recommend is choose some digital quick wins. Like for instance, it's at SAP, when we were implementing SuccessFactors, we started with, let's make all learning in SAP digital, right? And that was the first thing we implemented in that life cycle. Learning became all digital. It's all online, no paper. We reduced classrooms, a lot of things done online. It was a digital quick win. Everybody said, that's fantastic. We want more. So now you're off and running. People are saying, yeah, we like this digital workforce. We like this digital organization. And then you start taking whole business divisions and whole geographies and rolling out that model I showed you earlier of that integrated employee life cycle. And you create this across your organization. From there, really, you can start to say, right, once you're done with that, we now have a digital organization. We have a digital workforce. We've created this integrated employee life cycle, and we can run the business in this way. We created a place where people have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. We understand their motivations. We get them in the right place at the right time, with the right skills and the right motivation, and we underpin it with technology to make it permanent and part of the DNA. And guess what? When you get there, you're a digital winner. You can actually show uplifts in productivity, which creates higher revenues, higher profits. You can report that to your shareholders, or if you're in government, you can report that to taxpayers. So that's kind of where do we start, which is the kind of intent, create programs, do quick wins, expand on those, and then ultimately get to a place where you can show value by becoming a digital winner. And that's kind of the kind of roadmap to digital winning. And so when we look at kind of the technologies, and I think you need to be aware of kind of where things have been and where they're going. Well, we all know about core HR. Almost everybody has a core HR system. Most people have some sort of talent management suite on that. Many times it's a cloud-based kind of model. So that's kind of where we've been for the past sort of 20 years. What's really exciting is we're starting to see this kind of emergence of employee experience platforms, right? Where HR is not just about managing talent and core HR data. It's about that experience, right? That integrated life cycle. And these technologies are emerging now, and they're called the next generation technologies, which create that. We're going to make you manager and you employee better by giving you technologies where you're going to be able to manage yourselves in terms of talent and building talent. And then other things that are emerging are sort of specialist platforms around benefits and health and well-being. These are also emerging and very popular at the moment. So that's kind of where we've been and where we're going in terms of digital technology. So very exciting world coming out. So we're going to have to start wrapping up now, but I want to just give you a few key lessons learned that I learned over the years and what turned my hair gray and will hopefully avoid you doing the same. But let me tell you something. So don't let your transformation be about technology. It's the biggest mistake, and almost all organizations do it. They see the shiny new thing, they want to go buy it and implement it, right? And we've seen this year after year, and this has been part of the problem with impacting people's productivity. We're just buying the next shiny thing and then rolling it out. And AI is in danger of being that, right? And we have to really step back and say, no, it's not about the technology. How are we going to change our organization? How are we going to change our mindset, our processes, and then plug technology into that to make people and the organization better? Technology secondary, right? Figure out who you are as an organization first. Put that in place. That's powerful. The second, understand your workforce's motivations and their expectations, right? And we talked about this a moment ago. People's motivations and expectations are not 20th century anymore. They are much more complicated. And as a manager, it should be your role to figure this out and use performance management to understand what is motivating people, right? And use tools like BetterWorks to help drive that motivation and create a process and a set of technologies that will help you do that. The next one is rationalize your technology. If it isn't making people better, don't do it. As simple as that. It needs to be about making people better, right? I think we've got plenty of compliant software out there. We don't need to add to that pile. Let's add to the pile and rationalize the pile about making people better. Replacing people with digital technology, it's a false economy, right? The idea is we should use that technology to maybe replace a job, which frees up somebody to do something more value added, right? Using technology to save money is a false economy. You will save money, but guess what? If you make somebody 10 times better at what they do, that's worth 10 times more than any cost savings. And that's what technology can do if we put it in place. Have a business case and roadmap. The place where I've seen these programs fall down, right? They start with great intent and they often start with great results. But if you didn't have a business case that showed the value that you're going to get for your program, you're going to run into trouble later when there's economic conditions that impact it. And people are going to want to know what's the return on investment. You need to be able to answer that. And you need to have a roadmap to say, here we are, this is where we are, and this is where we're going. And here's the return on investment. Otherwise, the program gets shut down. I've seen that hundreds of times. And lastly, be human-centric, right? That's all I'm going to say. Just be human-centric in everything you do at work. And set aside kind of those old ways of thinking about command and control, those sorts of things. How do we make people better? So lastly, I'm just going to pull up a few things to think about future-proofing the digital workplace. There's 4 things I think you need to look out for, right? We've talked about the first in the upper left-hand. We're not going to go on that. Start to get ready for generative and voice-activated AI devices coming into the workplace. It's already happening some, but it's going to be coming, and you need to be ready, and you need to be ready to skill your workforce for that. Another thing, because AI is getting all the attention right now, another really exciting space is the metaverse, right? So Apple released their Vision Pro goggles, and they didn't make those for gaming. They made those for work, that you'll be doing your emails and your conference calls in Vision Pro goggles, right? And we don't have time to go into the detail how that's going to work, but that is coming, right? So it isn't just going to be your Amazon Alexa on your desk. You're going to also be using goggles at work soon, and we're going to have to teach people how to do that, right? Which gets to the last thing. Understand that digital workplace requires digital skills. You're going to have to completely rethink how you're going to train people and what they're going to need to learn to future-proof for the digital workplace. So I wanted to say thank you very much. We have set aside time for some questions. So Hung, if you can get us ready here, ready to take some questions. So let's go.
Folks, if you have any questions for Tim, please make use of the Q&A feature on the right-hand side. I've got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to completely dominate this space if you don't come and use that tool. Tim, I love your focus on sort of the requirement for organizations to understand employee motivation, and that being the key to unlocking engagement, which in turn is the key to unlocking productivity and performance. I've got a question for you in terms of changing motivations. Human beings are dynamic. They come in sort of at one point in their life, they have these motivations. They're going to change over time. How are companies meant to track the changes of motivation? Do you have any sort of thoughts on that question?
Yeah, it happens if we want to just get right to the nub of that, where does it happen? Where is it most? It happens in the performance management discussion, right? As a manager, I learned late in my career, which is unfortunate, but learned late in my career, ask people, what is it you want to do? 2 years, 5 years, even tell me about your personal motivations if you're open to that. So it happens at the management level, asking people, and then using the tools that you have to embed that then in the expectations you've set with that employee. It all starts there. But at the high level, then you want senior executives. I've been lucky to work for a lot of them, a lot of CEOs who said, this is important. We want to know what makes you tick, and we want to try to put you in the right place at the right time. So it happens at that performance management discussion. Then it happens at the CEO level saying, we want to put you in a position to succeed. Help us do that. Tell us what you need. Now, don't overpromise, right? Say we can't always do this, right? But organizations that have it as an option and a mindset, and then put in processes and technology, there's a better chance of it happening. So when you do that, then you're in tap on a regular basis by having regular conversations with your teams. You then understand their changing motivations. They change within a year. They change within 5 years. They change within 10. And it's up to managers to stay in tune with that. And people love it when you do. They think you're really invested in them.
Yeah, I think so. It's an interesting, I think back in my day when I was working for companies, the motivation question often wasn't asked at all. But if it was a once a year type of review. It was, okay, what are your next 12 months? And I was thinking, you know what, that's actually really, that's going to degrade the information I gave to the manager is going to degrade really quickly, because things are going to change in my life. They're going to change in the business. We know they're going to change in the world. Of course, my motivations will change again as well. Follow-up question for you on this, Tim. I mean, I guess we could always ping the employee base to try and get more information, updates. Do you still feel about this ranking of motivations and so on? Is there a danger that we might be moving into kind of engagement fatigue, where we're kind of overly, we're asking too much too often, and the employees are just ticking whatever to get through whatever survey that we've said? How do we manage the engagement fatigue problem?
Yeah, I mean, one technology I'm not a big fan of is engagement surveys. There's so many of them, and they all seem to do kind of the same thing, and I think they have not a lot of value. Sorry, you feel free to disagree with me, but again, I think just sending out mass surveys, and now it has to come down to the discussion with the person, right? All managers throughout the organization should have a mindset of understanding what it means to be, engaged. And it means different things in different workforces, let alone different organizations, right? IT people are motivated by very different thing than a salesperson, right? IT people want more and more training. Salespeople want more and more bonus, right? I mean, so you have to really be in tune with that. And I think just asking engagement surveys broadly doesn't help. It needs to be done in a very targeted way to understand how a workforce and a particular role works. And then you're getting granular, and then you're being, I think, more effective. And there are technologies that do that, right? So that's my sort of view.
Yeah, fantastic. And, if we could actually get sort of that sentiment data without asking the question, even better. But I guess we then move into a different set of questions, like, at what point are we invading people's privacy and what have you? But questions for another time. Folks, we're starting to get some questions into the Q&A, which is fantastic. Let's go to one of those straight away. I want to, there's a question here from Tamara Molinas, which I thought was really interesting. Tim, let's try and answer this one. How do you identify or define a human-centered approach to choosing the right technology? Is there a way in which we could kind of, describe that so that people can, really easily grok it?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I think the best way to look at that is if there's a particular part of the employee life cycle that you believe you need to improve. Let's just start with recruitment, for example. The way you should, the kind of mindset and the approach you should be looking at there is thinking about the person on the other side of that screen in terms of what they're going to expect, what they're going to see, right? And think about the technology not in terms of how is it going to help me track, how is it going to help me schedule, those types of things. Think about how is it going to help me to pull that person in and pull the right person and put them in our organization and in the right role and get them up to speed very, very quickly. That's very different from an application tracking system, right? So when we're talking about recruiting solutions, for me, an ATS is interesting, but that's kind of a very transactional thing. A lot of the kind of experience type platforms in the recruiting space, for example, are things that are very interactive. They use AI to talk to people. They allow people to talk to real people, and they understand the sentiment of the potential talent pool that you're looking at. And so basically what you should always be asking your question is, and I'll just use this as an example. Am I putting in place an ATS, which is only a transactional thing, or am I putting something in place that's going to actually make me better at recruiting? That's the dividing line. Now, you kind of need both, right? So it's just more about the balance that you're using, really. That all these transactional compliance tools do not necessarily go away. You just want the balance to tip more towards things that are making people better, and try to rationalize out things that are about process as much as you can. And so those would be kind of some examples that I would use. And what's been interesting is the pandemic really has accelerated people starting to understand and use these types of tools in recruiting. Right now, we can overly rely on them now a bit too much. Screen interviews, that sort of thing. Some of the AI has bias in it, so we can't have time to go into that. But overall, that's how I would say you judge the difference between compliance software and how do I make you better software.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Tim, we have to leave it there because we're going to move on to the next session, or at least we're going to take a break and then move on to the next session. Before I let you go, though, you do have a book out. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? When is it published, and how can people get a copy of this?
Yeah, so Revelation, helping the workplace harness AI, will be out in September. The publisher, I've got two publishers interested at the moment. I haven't decided on which one I'm going to go with. I want to go with the one that really understands that the AI is not a shiny tool. It's really a broader thing that we talked about today. And you will be able to, as with my other books, you can get them on Amazon. That's the easiest way to find them. And you can get a good deal on solving the productivity puzzle at the moment. I think Amazon might have a deal on it at the moment. But yeah, the new book will come out in September, and I'm already doing workshops and speeches on it. Yeah, having a lot of fun with the subject.
Fantastic stuff. I look forward to reading my copy as well, Tim. Tim Ringo, thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful sharing some space with you and getting your input. Okay, folks, by the way, make sure you follow Tim and make sure that you get connected with him on LinkedIn and all those types of places. Thank you so much for your questions. We're going to collect those together and hopefully get Tim to answer them offline a bit later. Okay, folks, we are going to be back at 1 o'clock. So a 5-minute break here to take some time, stretch your legs, get away from the computer for a bit. You definitely need to come back for this because we're going to go back to the case studies. We're going to be talking with Yasser Ahmed of HelloFresh and Dulce Fresha Pasquale over at Ferrer. And they're going to be talking about everyday breakthroughs using artificial intelligence and technology in HR. So if you want to kind of hear from your peer group, you want to hear from people who basically are doing the job you're doing and have making progress with technology, that's the way you should be tuning into that next session. Make sure you navigate over to the agenda, by the way. You'll see it coming through. Everyday breakthroughs to HR leaders who are driving sustainable innovation across their organizations. We'll be there at 1 p.m.